So I am a massive Harry Potter nerd, and I, like most other book fans, struggle with the movies. I do love them and I think they're really valuable and good films, but compared to the books, they are just weak adaptations that didn't really capture a lot of the core components of some of the main characters. And so today I want to go through each of the main characters from the Harry Potter series and talk about the differences between their book and movie persona. Let's start with the main character himself, Harry Potter. The first thing is the physical appearance. This one's a tough fix, as you pick a child actor who just seems to fit the role. Then puberty hits, and then the kid becomes very different from how the books portray him. In the books, Harry is much lankier and skinnier than his movie counterpart. He also has much messier hair that he cannot seem to tame, as well as green eyes in the book. His personality is also very different. In the movies, Harry is a bit rash. He's an okay friend, and he's very grumpy all the time. Daniel Radcliffe plays Harry a bit dryly, to be honest, because in the books, Harry is very, very sassy. Way sassier than movie fans know. He also has a serious saving people complex in the books that doesn't really get explained in the films. He is fiercely loyal, but always seems to want to save people who are in a precarious or rough situation. But he's also prone to emotional outbursts a lot more than his movie counterpart as well. Harry demolished Dumbledore's office after Sirius died. His grief and his PTSD in both Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince is much more intense as he deals with the death of Cedric and Sirius. Book Harry has much more rebellion in him as well, and he's a much more capable wizard than he is in the movies. I could go on for hours about the differences between the book and the movie versions of Harry, but let's go on to the next member of the Golden Trio, Hermione. In the movies, Hermione is way too pretty. I remember watching The Goblet of Fire with a massive crush on Hermione, who was Emma Watson, because she was just absolutely beautiful, especially with those highlights in her hair. But her book counterpart isn't quite as pretty. And she, like Harry, has this frizzy and nearly untamable hair that is always bushy and out of control. I say nearly untamable because her transformation in the Yule Ball chapter is a pivotal one because she does tame it. And Harry and Ron both notice, and everyone in the book seems to notice how amazing Hermione looks at that moment. It reminded me a bit of the Princess Diaries transformation with Anne Hathaway. And her personality is just very different as well. In the films, Hermione is more of a cool girl. You understand why some of the boys have a big crush on her. But in the books, she is much bossier and a bit more socially awkward. She's also insane in the books. I am serious. There are two things that the movies don't portray. Where number one, she entraps Rita Skeeter in beetle form in a jar for a few weeks to months. And then, number two, she also bewitches the parchment that Dumbledore's army signs so that when Marietta Edgecombe rats them out, and it's not Cho like the movies have, she has the word sneak written across Marietta Edgecombe's forehead in acne and boils. It's so bad that she has to go to St. Mungo's. And honestly, the series makes it sound like she never fully recovered and the scars were always there. Sheesh, Hermione is insane in the books. She also cares much more about house elves than she does in the movies, and is just a bit nerdier in the books. She's actually just a bit maniacal in the books, which makes her, in my opinion, a more interesting character. And now Ron, the person that got the majority of their good lines stolen from his soon-to-be wife Hermione. That's right, Ron is a legend in the books, and has so many important lines that he delivers, but the movies just decided to make him a dumb bimbo and they gave all of his good lines to Hermione. But first, his appearance is also very different. He's taller than the shorter and stockier twins, which the movie doesn't have, and he's gangly with freckles everywhere on his face. And Ron in the movies is a bit more insecure but confident at the same time. I think Rupert Grint is the best actor out of the trio, and he portrays that pretty well, but Ron has this confidence about him of knowing the wizarding world, but at the same time is an emotional wreck and deeply insecure. Grint, I do think, portrays this well in the Silver Doe section where he's about to destroy the Horcrux, as well as the scenes where he is just nervous to play Quidditch. but he is way more knowledgeable and brave in the series. In the whole, and excuse my language, mudblood discussion, it's Ron that gives the crew the whole deep dive into what the word means in the wizarding world, not Hermione. Because in the books, how the heck would Hermione know that? And Ron does it while he's throwing up slugs. In another one of my favorite moments, he is the one that stands between Sirius and Harry to say to Sirius that he'll have to kill him and Hermione before he gets to Harry. And he does this with a broken leg. His skills are also much more pertinent and honed in the books, as his movie counterpart is just funny, but seems to lack the basic magical skills to survive. Ron seems to be a better friend to Harry and is a much more serious contributor to the problems the Golden Trio faces than the movies make it out to be. In the movies, it's like Hermione does 95% of the work, Harry 5%, and Ron is just along for the ride. But in the books, it's honestly evenly split between the three of them for what they contribute to their larger goal, which makes it that much more devastating when Ron leaves in the 7th book. But I could keep talking about this, but let's get to the villain. No, I'm not talking about Voldemort. I'm talking about Severus Snape. Because in the books, he is much, much more of a bully, a meanie, and a villain than he is in the movies. Yes, I know that might be hard to believe, but Alan Rickman actually gave the part a lot of sympathy and likability. Even though we still hate Snape in the movies, he is much more enjoyable of a character. But in the books, Snape is, firstly, much more greasy and gross, and secondly, he is not really an unsung hero in the books. Although I am a Snape defender and actually love him as a character, I legitimately think he's one of the more complex and interesting characters in all of literature, but he is much more cruel and flat out mean. His obsession with Lily Potter is a bit more unhealthy, to say the least. And he is not shown as just a misunderstood hero, but rather as just a deeply flawed man with good intentions, or maybe one good intention. Again, I love Snape as a character, but in the films, his whole redemption arc is much more romanticized in my opinion. In the books, he's seen as a gross man who ultimately just had a good fight in him. Because his intentions, to be honest, were still weird. Was he protecting Harry out of his love for Lily? Did he even love Lily? Go ask that on a Harry Potter subreddit and see the fire that this question lights in thousands of fans. But Snape is a bit more complicated of a character than Alan Rickman portrays him. And honestly, I almost prefer Alan Rickman's portrayal. It makes him more palatable. Because in the books, Snape is noble but selfish. He is brave but also disgusting. He's loyal but also obsessive in a very unhealthy way. And he's one of those characters that you just hate to love. In our Discord, there is some serious debate every so often about Snape being a good or bad character, because he is that divisive of a person. Now, let's talk about our favorite half-giant Hagrid. I have no notes on Hagrid. To me, Robbie Coltrane is Hagrid. Perfectly. This is one of the only roles in the film that I think captures in a perfect adaptation what the book character was like. The only qualm I have is that in the books, Hagrid plays a much more significant role in Harry's life, as the trio goes down to see him all the time in the books. It's like every other chapter they're going to see Hagrid. In the movies, he's seen as a second thought for the group. But Robbie Coltrane, may he rest in peace, is forever Hagrid to me. A perfect depiction of Hagrid in every way. But you might deeply disagree with me on this one, so just let me know in the comments what you think. Because now we're going to talk about the man, the myth, the one raising up a pig for slaughter, Dumbledore. The first thing is his appearance. And before I go on a rant of everything I hate about both movie portrayals of Dumbledore, I have to praise the fact for I think they nailed the appearance of Dumbledore, except for one thing. Dumbledore wears eccentric clothing and colors. His robes are never gray, and this is significant because his personality is much more whimsical in the books. In the movie, Richard Harris plays the first Dumbledore, and he was decent, but he lacked a bit of the whimsy and the power that Dumbledore had. And while Gambon took on the role and added a bit more of that power to it, I think Gambon butchered the role. It's well known, but Gambon famously didn't read the series because he wanted to try to give a new take on a character. but that only meant to me that he missed the core elements of Dumbledore's personality that are so vitally important in the books. The first one is his calmness and joy over magic. Dumbledore seems to delight in magic, like he never lost that first love he had of doing magic. This is so significant to me, to the character of Dumbledore, that it seemed to be the first thing that Jude Law picked up when he took on the role in Fantastic Beasts. And I think Law does the best portrayal of Dumbledore in my opinion. Not only does he delight in magic, but he is also much gentler. Gambon has lines where he yells at students. And Harris has this famous line where he yells silence. There's even the popular meme where Gambon strangles Harry in Goblet of Fire about putting his name in the Goblet of Fire. Book Dumbledore would never. In fact, one of the only times in the series you see Dumbledore lose his temper is when Umbridge puts a hand on a student. And it's a famous quote, but you always want to beware the anger of a gentle person. This encapsulates Dumbledore to me. He is so gentle and calm that when he does get angry, it's something that you notice and something that is terrifying in the books. I could go on for so long here, but I want to keep it shorter. But Dumbledore in the books has a much darker past that the movies really glance over. He also seems to be in much more control of the situation than he appears to be in the movies, which is devastating when he dies because Harry truly feels like he knows nothing and can do nothing after the funeral. And finally, movie Dumbledore is missing the warmth and the little sparkle in his eyes that book Dumbledore has. And I think this is so vitally important in the books because book Dumbledore loves Harry. Without that spark in his eyes, his movie counterpart just seems to tolerate or just train Harry, but not really love him. And for a series that is all about love, that is a significant departure. Speaking of a series, let's talk about Sirius. That was a lame transition, sorry. Sirius Black is a child. And I mean this with no disrespect because his book version is dealing with significant trauma from being locked in Azkaban for 12 years. And there are trauma specialists that talk about how sometimes those years just evaporate and you get stuck at whatever age you were at when you experienced that trauma. And Sirius is that. He absolutely is a father figure to Harry early on in the series because of age, but he quickly shifts to more of a brother role in the series, which isn't what Harry needs at all. You can't blame Sirius, to be honest, but there's even a section in the movies that fans hate that I think it's weirdly good. It's a section where he dies, and the last thing he says is, "Nice one, James." It's a line people hate because they don't want that to be the last words he says to Harry, but I think they're weirdly accurate for his book portrayal. His last line in the book, by the way, is, "Come on, you can do better than that," when he's speaking to Bellatrix. But Sirius mistaking Harry for James feels like something he would do, because Sirius just wants to be living an adventure and having fun. He's as reckless as Harry at times. And when Harry starts to mature up, he honestly becomes more of a father figure to Sirius than Sirius is to Harry. In Order of the Phoenix, Sirius is grumpy all the time, being locked up in Grimmauld Place. And while his book portrayal does kind of come to surface and help Harry with significant amounts, as well as give him great advice at times, Sirius's death was probably what he wanted. He wanted to go out fighting like that. He wanted to be adventurous and have a good time rather than be a father to Harry. And Sirius, this one might be controversial, is a bit crueler in the books as well. He does have a kind heart, but he, to me, almost seems like the same version of Snape, but on the good side. He isn't obsessed by love like Snape is, but he kind of has the love dwelling in him, but he is more obsessed with the regret on the life that he could have lived. And so he kind of becomes a cruel and mean, and he becomes an absolute menace to people like Kreacher. And he was even the one that told Harry, if you want to know what a man's like, take a good look on how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. And then Sirius proceeds to beat Kreacher and banish him from the house. Sirius is a very confusing character, although in his heart he is good and pure. But in the books, he's just dealing with significant trauma that he needs to figure out and work through. He's less mature than his movie counterpart, although I fully understand why so many fans love him so much. He is reckless and crazy in the books, but is also just an incredibly heartwarming character. You just seem to love something about Sirius, and I think you love what he has in his heart, which is good and pure, and it's love that Sirius possesses. And now let's talk about Ginny. Oh, sorry, that's a picture of a board. This is Ginny, the most massively frustrating character change in the entirety of the Harry Potter universe. Because damn, her book counterpart is so cool. I remember reading it for the first time in high school, having a massive crush on her. She was just confident, fiery, just had a face full of freckles. She was well liked by everyone, and she was just hot as a $2 pistol. Her movie counterpart simply ties Harry's shoelaces and feeds him pies. And I don't blame Bonnie Wright at all. This woman can act, and she could have done a fantastic depiction of Ginny. But the screenwriters giving her these lame lines are what drives me crazy. In the books, she is fierce, not afraid to call people out, and not afraid to hang out with people that other people think are lame. Ginny is confident, but also incredibly kind. In the movies, she's just seen as this passive character. In the books, she is active. She's like a lion hunting her prey. She has this confidence that is at times quiet and at other times boisterous. She is insanely talented as a witch as well, doing spells that the rest of the DA are very impressed about. And for the new HBO series coming out, I cannot tell you the amount of fans I've heard who want her role to reflect the books much more than the movies do. She is one of those characters who needs a full rework. And finally, the Dark Lord himself, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Or should I say, I am Lord Voldemort. But I love Ralph Fiennes. I think he does incredibly, incredibly well. But his movie portrayal is just very different from Voldemort in the books. In some ways, it's an improvement. And in others, I wanted what the books had. Fiennes plays Voldemort in a much more eccentric way. He smiles, he's super dramatic, he waves his hands everywhere, and just seems to have emotions that he almost cannot control. Voldemort in the books is much quieter and much calmer. And that, to me, makes him significantly scarier. It's not a perfect portrayal, but Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men is how I pictured Voldemort. A bit more than how Fiennes portrays him. And I think Chigurh is maybe the scariest villain in any film that I've ever seen. He also does not mess around or play with his food. If Voldemort wants to kill someone, he'll kill them. In the movies, he's much more theatrical and emotional. If you read the books, you'd never in a million years think that he could have a child with Bellatrix, because Riddle would just never. But in the movies, they maybe have a shot. This is the whole plot of Cursed Child, if you're confused. He also has a deeper fear of death than the movies portray. I mean, the entirety of the series is about him living forever, and I never got the vibe in the film that it was particularly that important to Fiennes. But in the movies, this seems like his greatest fear and his greatest motivation for doing what he's doing. I made a video a few weeks ago about the HBO casting and what I want for the HBO casting, and I talked about Hugo Weaving playing the role of Voldemort, and I just cannot get this out of my head. The coldness that Hugo plays Elrond or Agent Smith with is exactly the kind of portrayal that I want for Voldemort. So HBO, go hire Hugo, please, for my sake. But this is the main difference between the movie and the book characters in the Harry Potter series. Each of these could be an hour-long video, to be honest, but maybe I'll save that for another time. For now, let me know what other changes you think about these characters from the book to the movies, and the things that you hope the HBO series gets right. Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe, please subscribe, and like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.